Welcome to Fasting Myths. Let's start with our quotes. Love these quotes. So, when nothing comes in, the body turns inward and begins to repair. It's August Dunning's from The Phoenix Protocol. And then we have Anne Marie Colvin, who's a nutritionist, considered a pioneer of the whole foods and natural nutrition movement. And she has been quoted as saying, healing occurs naturally if it's allowed. And then we have a quote from Mark Twain, a little starvation can do more than the best medicine. So they just realize these things on their own through experience, each of these. And so, fasting myths, what we have here today, we're going to be looking at fasting is harmless and 100% safe. Fasting is dangerous and unsafe. This concept of like we need to eat. Fasting is only for weight loss. You can eat whatever you want during the feeding window. If you don't eat, then you'll die. Fasting is good for the skin and it clears your acne. Fasting causes nutritional deficiencies. You should eat constantly to boost your metabolism. And by boosting your metabolism, you're going to burn more fat. Fasting is just starving yourself. You'll lose all of your muscle. You can't exercise while fasting, and you'll be miserable the whole time. So, fasting is harmless and 100% safe. So, for a generally healthy person, there is very little risk, but it's different for people on medications or who aren't eating healthy. A diabetic person taking insulin, for instance, needs to speak with their doctor, work with their doctor, and know how to do it safely. Fasting has been shown to cure people of type 2 diabetes, um, and even some cases for type 1. And so it is very healthy for a diabetic person, but it's important to um, have a doctor know that you're doing it and be tested and be under kind of superveillance, be able to know what is important for you to look out for, when might you need to check with your doctor, and these different types of things. For people older, over 60, and especially over 80, the autophagy is not happening as efficiently. There is a stress that's being put on the body when we're fasting for longer periods of time. And it can, some people do feel like heart palpitations and different things like that. And these could be signs that you might want to stop the fast or at least see a doctor. Different symptoms that are very common and to be aware of is that you might experience insomnia and inability to sleep. There might be fatigue. There's dry mouth, headaches, dizziness, electrolyte imbalances, different types of things that might happen. Sometimes there are like things can happen with the organs, with the liver, and and it's just being aware of what your health conditions are and what to be aware of, knowing that these symptoms are very normal, but if they become too extreme, then they can become a problem. And the most important part of fasting, where a lot of actual issues come in, is when we refeed, especially when we've been fasting for more than 3 days, 5 days, 10 days. Then the refeeding part becomes very delicate. There was a newspaper article from a few years ago, maybe 10 years ago, of a person who was fasting for 5-ish days, and he ate a whole pizza to break his fast, and he ended up dying because his heart couldn't handle that. And his heart went through some palpitations and did something, cardiac arrest, and he died. Another anecdotal evidence, a friend of a friend was fasting with her friends, doing 21-day fasts. They would do it a few different times in the year. And and they were shown to uh, hmm, hold on. Don't like that my phone is beeping. All right. So I have another friend that would fast 21 days. She's older, so this was in like the 60s or 70s. Group of friends fasting together. And one of her friends decided to break the fast with a Snickers bar. and he had to go to the hospital. So it's just refeeding is like the most important and most challenging part of the fast. So fasting is dangerous and unsafe. So this idea of we need to eat, this is my mom. She's like, you have to eat. Even when you're sick, you need to eat because it gives you energy and lets your body heal because you have the energy now. But that's the opposite. So we're perfectly well adapted to be in periods of famine or periods of fasting. It's evolutionarily designed for fasting because when we were cave people, before we had agriculture, we were constantly running out of food or dealing with the changing of seasons. We couldn't store our food. We went through periods all the time of having a hunt and then not having any food for days at a time. And so our body is has been naturally evolved and has developed to have these periods of fasting. And it goes through these cleansing processes that it doesn't go through when we're not fasting. So it's perfectly natural to fast. And we naturally don't want to eat when we're sick, but we force ourselves to because we think that it's healthy to, that our body needs that energy, but we're totally fine. And when we don't want to eat when we're sick, it's actually our body saying, hey, don't force me to use energy on digestion. I really want to use this energy on curing whatever's ailing me. So animals, you'll notice they do it the same way, and they're not as in their head about things. They just listen to their bodies. And so if you watch your dog or your cat when they're sick, they're not eating until they're well enough to eat again. So fasting is dangerous and unsafe. Not very true. And if you don't eat, you'll die. We have up to 3 months of vitamins and minerals stored in our liver and in our body and our fat. There's many examples of people fasting for more than 40 days, even dry fasting for 14 days. That's no water. I was always taught if you don't drink water for 3 days, then you're gonna die. Like we need water within 3 days. But there's stories of people who are not drinking water and not eating food for 14 days and they are fine and even measuring themselves and considering it healthy and promoting people to do it. So the longest ever fast was 382 days. This was from 1965 to 1966. Angus Barbieri. I'm not sure how to say it, but he's Scottish. And he was 456 pounds and he went down to 180 pounds. And he just decided, I feel too heavy. I'm too fat. It doesn't feel good. I want to lose weight. I'm just going to stop eating food. He just did it on his own accord. And then he started seeing doctors and things once it started progressing. But he just kept going to work, kept doing his thing, living life as normal. He just stopped eating. And he was only taking in water, tea, and coffee and sparkling water. And then once he started seeing doctors, they kind of prescribed him nutritional supplements of like yeast, potassium, and sodium, basically taking in those electrolytes that we need to take in when we're fasting. It helps a lot. And there was no recorded ill effects. And when he broke his fast, it was just a little hard-boiled egg. And so fasting is only for weight loss. But you'll lose weight, yes, initially losing a lot of water weight. And initially, it's focusing on your visceral belly fat, which is fantastic because it's very inflammatory. It's not very healthy to have, but it's just another example of our body being evolved too fast because our body stores visceral fat and it's only there for a temporary storage. There's regular fat that's put over the body for insulation, protection, and different things. And then there's visceral fat that's around our organs and our belly. And that's only there. So it can be used in periods of fasting, short-term periods of fasting. So that's what's being used first. And that's part of weight loss. But the main benefits that really come from fasting is the autophagy, the body's self-cleansing mechanisms. Inflammation goes down, irritable bowel system, and other gut problems can be resolved from fasting. Autoimmune improvements, psoriasis, arthritis, and others. Insulin sensitivity becomes better regulated. We can reset our gut biome, the bacteria and stuff that is in our gut that is an important part of our digestion, our mental health, and the whole way our body works. We can reset the dopamine sensitivity, reducing cravings. It's very anti-cancer. It promotes longevity. Blood pressure becomes normalized. Medications are reduced and ultimately eliminated for many people. So those are so many benefits of fasting. You can eat whatever you want during the feeding window. Myth. There's this idea people have. I can eat whatever I want because I'm fasting, and so the body will just handle it. But when fasting consistently, the effects of eating poorly are lessened. But what you eat is super important. You are what you eat. And just notice, how do you feel after eating different foods? How do you feel after eating an apple versus eating a bag of chips? After eating a whole, half gallon of ice cream, you feel different. The ignore the part where you're eating it and it tastes so good, but get to the part after that where you feel so sick and you're tired and you just want to sit on the couch and do nothing. But when you eat healthy foods, that doesn't come over you when you're eating vegetables and whole foods. A whole plant-based diet. You can put meat in there, make sure it's organic and grass-fed. And when you're eating these things, it's harder to overeat and it's easier to digest. You usually feel lighter, and you're not so heavy, tired, lethargic, lazy. And that comes from when you're eating really unhealthy foods, processed foods. So, as Hippocrates said, let food be thy medicine. And he also continued saying, let medicine be thy food. But saying the same thing, use your food as your medicine. When you eat well, you are well. So fasting is good for the skin and clears acne. This is not so prolific, but it is an idea that's out there. But there just hasn't been enough studies done to prove that this is true. Even while during the fast, you might actually experience some dry skin, a dry mouth. Rashes might happen during the fast as the body is cleansing itself, and depending on what toxins it's releasing, sometimes it releases toxins through the skin. And so you might have these experiences. But fasting has been shown to reduce eczema and psoriasis. And without eating a lot of sugar and without eating these greasy foods, your pimples are likely to decrease or go away. So fasting causes nutritional deficiencies. No, we have stored vitamins, as I said before, and nutrients in our body. Up to 3 months worth. We have our liver stores a lot of those vitamins, like vitamin B's, vitamin C's, different things. We need to get out in the sun, and we'll have our vitamin D, very important. But our fat stores a lot of energy and water. It uses some of our muscles to get glucose. And then also our bones provide some backup vitamins and nutrients that the body might need. And obviously, when you use these things too much, it becomes a problem. So consistent fasting can lead to actual deficiencies if you're doing too much fasting, like every week. And longer durations, especially over 10 days, that's when like you start to come into more potential deficiencies and really more need to be monitored and to be checking your health condition, your blood levels and nutrient levels and everything. Noticing if organs are starting to have trouble and stuff like that. And then especially over 40 days is when a lot of fasting clinics, that's kind of when their cutoff is. Because after 40, it kind of starts to become a lot more complicated for most people. So the real problem is when you're not eating quality foods, when you're in your feeding windows, and so if you're not giving your body the nutrients it needs, then when you're fasting, you're more likely to come into nutritional deficiencies because you're not really being what would it be? Nutritionally efficient or full when you're even when you're eating. And so then once you start fasting, you don't have those stores that it can access. There's one example like living off of savings after you quit your job. When you quit your job, you still have your savings and you're using those savings and you're totally fine as long as you get a job soon enough after. So like one of the things I do want to focus on is consistent fasting can lead to deficiencies. If you're doing like intermittent fasting, 16-8 window where you're fasting for 16 hours and you're eating for 8 hours, and then you're also throwing in a 36-hour fast every week. And if you do that over a long period of time, you can actually come into nutritional deficiencies. And you want to kind of be a little more sporadic where you do have more feeding windows to break that up. You should eat constantly to boost metabolism. I used to hear this all the time before, where it's like really good to snack in between meals and it keeps your metabolism boosted and you burn more calories. But it actually isn't the full truth. So eating does bring up the metabolism. There's even a term for it. I don't remember. It's something like the thermic process of eating, something like this. And frequency of eating actually doesn't change this. It's just the total calories you intake in a day. So whether you eat 2 meals of 2,000 calories or you're eating like 6 times in a day and it's 2,000 calories, the metabolism boost is the same. You're not like maintaining it at a high level. And it's actually kind of worse because then you're maintaining your insulin at a high level, which then promotes more fat retention. And when your insulin's not dropping down, your blood sugar is staying high, and it's actually worse in a lot of different ways. But the actual causes for metabolism boost is the total calories intaken in a day, your body composition, how much muscle mass you have. The more muscle you have, the higher metabolism. Your hormone levels, especially how much insulin's in your body, and your activity level. When you work out, you have higher, especially when you work out in the morning, you have an increased metabolism throughout the day. So fasting is just starving yourself. Not really true. Fasting is when there's no food, and starvation is when there's not enough food. So starvation happens when you're eating just a little bit every day for a long time. Your body goes into this starvation mode, and it never really comes into ketosis, and it starts eating away at the muscles, the lean tissue, instead of at the fat. So your body can enter a fasting state when receiving nothing, but prolonged insufficient calories keeps the body out of fasting and more so in starvation. So still operating under glucose and energy, but without enough glucose, so it starts to use that lean tissue. So when it doesn't, so when you're in starvation mode, you're not entering ketosis and you're not entering autophagy. So very different states, fasting versus starving. You'll lose all of your muscle if you're fasting. There's many personal stories from YouTubers and from Tim Ferriss doing their self-studies and self-body composition measurements, where they were shown after doing a 7-day fast. Tim Ferriss showed he walked 4 hours a day on his 7-day fast, and he lost zero lean muscle. In his, he's working with doctors and doing it with a lot of money, and that's what it showed him. And I've watched other YouTubers in their own personal stories where they did not, they only lost, 1 to 10% of lean muscle mass. Um, but there is studies that have shown potentially 50% to two-thirds of the weight you lose is actually lean muscle tissue. So it is possible, it does happen, but there is human growth hormone is increased 5 to 14 times in your body, and the human growth hormone is that when you're growing as a child, which is what increases your ability to grow in your bones and in your muscles. Um, but once you're an adult, it comes in and it's great for growing muscle, but it's also there as a really nice preventative for muscle loss. It's also been shown in the fasting cases to really help promote healthy cartilage and healthy bones. Um, and whatever you lose in the muscle has been shown to be regained quickly after refeeding, especially because you have that extra human growth hormone in there and it goes to work. And then also, what's fun is that the fat lost did not return after refeeding as long as they maintained a healthy diet and didn't go back to processed foods and overeating and all that stuff. You can't exercise while fasting. So there's mixed reviews on this. My personal belief is that light to moderate exercise is really great. It helps prevent and preserve your muscles. You can jog, walk, lift weights, but lighter than maybe what you're used to. Play with your kids. Avoid the intense workouts. Don't be trying to do personal records or personal bests. Keep it very light, but some use of muscles is very good. If you're sedentary, of course you're going to lose muscles. If you're sedentary while eating, you're going to be losing, your muscles are going to be atrophying. If that happens within like 5 days if you're not moving. So yeah, keep the movement going, do a little bit of weight training, light to moderate exercise. Evolutionarily, our body in fasting mode, it needs to get food. So of course it's going to preserve energy. It's going to be able to provide energy and preserve the muscles, the things that it needs to get food to survive. Um, but also while you're fasting, drink salts, drink electrolytes. There's really, really good like fasting salts if you look on Amazon or go to a store that have sodium, potassium, and magnesium in there, but without any flavoring, without any sugars added, so it doesn't mess up your fast. And lastly, you're going to be miserable the whole time while you're fasting. And there's some truth to that. The first 3 days are typically really tough. Um, there's a ghrelin hormone, which is the hunger hormone. That's going to be rising extra on the first couple days. And the ghrelin hormone tells you that it tells the brain that you're hungry and that you really want to eat. So then you really get those strong cravings. It's harder when it's your first time, typically. It's harder when you aren't coming into it in a healthy way. If you come into it, after eating like ice creams and candies and lots of sugar and like really like upping your insulin a lot, then it becomes a lot harder because your body takes longer to come into ketosis. And once you're in ketosis, where the body's just using the fat for energy, then it starts to become a lot easier. But that transition period is usually the hardest part. So usually by day 4, people start to experience a bit more clarity, a bit more lightness, a bit more energy, not as tired, not as the headaches go away. You start to find mental clarity. Um, all that comes in for you. So you won't be miserable the whole time. And what I've noticed for myself, every single time, it feels different. It's a different experience. There was one 5-day fast that just felt so easy. There was no headaches, no problems. I'm living with roommates. They're cooking in the kitchen, no cravings, just smells it and it smells so delicious. I can just enjoy the smells of the food, but I don't have that super strong craving. And now I'm in a fast right now. I'm only on day 4. And day 3, yesterday was so challenging. I couldn't do anything. I couldn't even go for a walk. And whenever I got out of bed after like laying down because I was so tired, I would have to hold myself up. I'd have to put my hand on the wall, go through a little bit of a black dizzy spell just for a few seconds. But it was like, whoa, this is a really tough fast. For some reason, this one feels harder. But yeah, but it's really, for a lot of people, not that bad. And each time it will be a new experience. So, with all those myths debunked and understood, let's fast. Let's go.